Ladies and gentlemen, the journey for focus, clarity, and mental mastery is about to begin. Live from WSIC Studios on the shores of Lake Norman, the show that gives you the tools to think sharper, sleep deeper, manage stress, and unlock your full mental potential. This is Your Brain Matters. And now, with over 30 years of brain science, more than 70,000 brain analyses, bringing neuroscience to everyday life, here's your host, Dr. Tim Royer.
Welcome, bringing neuroscience to everyday life. That is what we are trying to do, Amy and I. We've been doing this for a while, right?
That's right. We love that line.
Isn't it awesome?
Yep. It's very concise.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. And along with Your Brain Matters. It's
like the explanation of Your Brain Matters.
Yeah. That's how it works. We are excited to have you. We've been working on the ADHD series, but then we had a little break.
Yes.
We had Audrey and Jeremy.
Yes. And if you didn't hear those episodes, that would be a great gift to give to yourself, is to go back and listen to those. We had two, I guess you would call them client stories. Now, obviously, they're friends or relationship to us.
Yeah.
Yes. But the stories, and a lot of times all we need really is a good story to motivate ourselves and to inspire ourselves. And to be fair, I was inspired from doing both of those. Like, there was many times that I thought back on what that person said during that hour, and how amazing that actually is. So we say Your Brain Matters all the time. You know, you and I do, day in, day out. We say it to each other. We say it to everybody. But it was so impactful to have these two stories, humans, in the studio with us and explaining their story and why they know their brain matters.
Yeah, it's just not words on a paper. It's a story, right? Isn't that what life is? It's really, our lives are just a series of these relationships, right? That pile on each other, and some relationships make us really healthy, some make us kind of sick. But when you see these relationships that we've had where somebody's life has changed, that's really what it's all about. We talk about the science, where science meets everyday life, but it's the everyday life. It's the stories that really are the difference. And it's what it keeps us going. We've been kind of talking through some of the things that are the drivers of what we do. And we're going to probably do a full episode on that. But one of them is this whole concept of hope, and that we're all just not static. We're either getting stronger or we're getting weaker, right?
Yeah.
And when you watch somebody get stronger, like in Jeremy's case and Audrey's case, you see the hope. That's really a glimpse of the hope that's out there for everybody in some way, right?
Yep. And honestly, hope is a great word to talk about today, because we've been talking about this ADHD topic. We've done 3 episodes unpacking, just what is it? What does it look like? How do we call it its name? Things like that. But way back in the beginning of time for you and I, this was where we started, was within this space of ADHD and working with children, trying to help children. And we literally named our business Hope 139 because we heard so many people say to us, I've done everything, I've lost hope.
Right.
And then they did come to us, and we work with people, and they said, now I have hope again. And it kept being repeated so much that we named our business Hope 139. And the 139 comes from Psalm 139, where the Bible tells us that each of us are fearfully and wonderfully made. So that was, the driving concept behind where our business began, was each of these kids is unique.
Right.
And we have to work with their brain. And that is something that's very hopeful, no matter where you meet up with it.
Yeah. So our roots, even though we call ourselves Royer Neuroscience currently, grew back 26 years, is Hope 139, which that came out of a place where it was stagnant. The medical arena, the whole, what people were being provided, which is, just all we can do is chemically alter your brain. it was very stagnant, no growth, no hope. It was just take this pill. And it's like, wait a minute. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. We were made by a creator to create. And hope is the word that describes that.
Right. And then we've said it before on the show that you left a really good position at the Children's Hospital because you felt that this wasn't really the best way to go for children. And so long story short, when we had our business, Hope 139, we were actually working in schools.
Yeah.
So we would take our equipment into a school. We'd work with 20 kids in a morning, head to another school with our equipment, work with another 20 kids. And parents were getting to us through their school administrator. It was pretty innovative and lasted for quite a while before we started to do our own office.
Yeah, we had close to, I think, 35, 40 schools.
Yeah.
And the kids, like during the school day, would go and get an EEG session or a breathing session for 15 minutes and then come back or 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah. They were.
It was amazing.
I'm trying to think because I did this for you with you. This is me. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm ready to re-enter the workforce. So what do? I go take our equipment into school and work with kids all day. So it's kind of funny, but I think it also is where my heart is that kids and catching things at a young age and really changes the trajectory. So it was really rewarding. But I believe I would sit with those kids for half an hour each. And it was such a win-win because the parents didn't have to be taking off of work and driving them across town. And the teachers were right there on site. They were noticing the changes in the classroom. And everybody was collaborating through the administrator, whatever. It was very, very innovative and rewarding.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yes.
It was great. Well, we have been, we just got back from Hilton Head. We were there for 6-7 days.
Yeah, we usually come in and talk about where has Doc been for the last 7 days. And I can tell you that for the last 7 days, I stole him from the world. And we have been in Hilton Head. And just shout out to anybody who can do this is just get out of your environment sometimes. Yeah. We take our computers, we work, but you see everything from a different perspective, and it just has a different feel to it, a little bit different downtime. So Doc and I didn't speak to anyone in a professional presentation manner. We spoke to each other a lot, and we had time to catch up on some things.
Play tennis every morning.
We did. We played tennis every morning for a half an hour. 2 of those sessions, the dog was chasing the ball, which was a little bit less than great, but it was wonderful to be outside. Hilton Head is amazing.
Yeah.
I think it was
a lot of hush puppies.
Ate a lot of seafood and hush puppies and key lime pie, and we are rebounding from that right now. But good for the soul, but also I think good for the mind to stir the pot a little bit and bring just make life feel different for 7 days. And so you gotta get out of your routine. Sometimes it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, when we come back, we're gonna get into this next phase on ADHD, this next section. Can't wait. Hey, well, welcome back. We've been in this series on ADHD talking a lot about extinguishing Einstein.
That's our book.
That's our book.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, and we have forgot to mention that people can get that book for free.
Yes, they
What
can.
number do they text?
616-341-2299.
Yes, and we will mail that to you for free. And so Doc is going to tell us a little bit about a new area in the book. We've already been talking about the first couple chapters of the book, and we're kind of to the middle. And this is such a good spot to be in. So hopefully you guys can join, understand how we're kind of pivoting today from everything we talked about initially about the book to now we're going to kind of get on this little pivot and move in the next direction.
Yeah, so we really spent the initial part about deviation. Like, what is deviation? Do we call it bad when somebody deviates? And then we talked about diagnostics. We're kind of towards the end of diagnostics, and then we're going to talk about how we train, or how do we make the brain stronger. But in this last phase of diagnostics, we need to kind of pull back the curtain and kind of look at what's going on currently in the diagnostic system, especially when it comes to ADHD. And so I ran across this. I was thinking of different dimensions. Okay, so I think that when we look at how things are done on the mental health side, especially in ADHD, it's either you go through these checklists and it's all like just either you have it or you don't have it. Mm-hmm. It's very just two-dimensional. Where are you on this scale?
Yes. From
severe to very small symptoms. And even now, like with things like autism, it's more on a scale of
the spectrum
from one end to the other.
Yeah.
Well, there was in the late 1880s, there was this book. It was called Flatland. You probably never heard of it. But they were kind of trying to pull back how people were just looking at life from one perspective. And in the story, the characters are these shapes. And so they can only see the dimension of like a square or a circle. And so the characters are these two-dimensional shapes. But they don't realize that they're actually all three-dimensional. They're more like a sphere or a cube. And kind of the awakening in the story is that the hero realizes there's more to people than just this one way that he sees them, that he can see them through other dimensions. So in psychology, we would call that attribution theory. Like, we kind of attribute certain qualities to people, like that person's kind of angry, that person's happy, Donald Trump is this, Michael Jordan is that. We have these certain traits, but we don't really give them the bandwidth to say, wait a minute, it may depend on the situation how that person is, right?
Right.
And they have different dimensionality to them. And so when it comes to looking at disorders, you can't just look at them two-dimensionally as, on a spectrum. And so we have to look at them three-dimensionally. We have to look at all the different layers to that. Mm-hmm. And we particularly talk about in the upstream, downstream model, right?
That jumps right into my mind, because if you're saying two-dimensional, I'm thinking about the length and the width of something.
Yes.
Right? And then you're saying upstream, downstream, that's the depth. So this is giving us a three-dimensional picture.
Yes, and if I'm only looking at it two-dimensionally, then I miss the other factors. So we talked about this when we were talking about the DSM.
Yes.
The DSM is a very two-dimensional model.
Yeah.
Is you have a behavior or you don't have a behavior. But it's not asking, well, why? Mm-hmm. And what do I do about that behavior?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we want to get beyond just what we see, but what's behind what we see, and what is the depth? Like, what are some things that have led to that?
Yep.
What are things that are coming forward? And looking at the whole person, not just the downstream behavior, looking at the brain.
Perfect. Well, I want to dig into this with you because we have already told the audience we had this exact scenario happen with our firstborn in school. The teachers recommended that he needed to be on a medication for attention. And so we did the two-dimensional thing, and it turned out poorly.
Right.
And we didn't know any better in that moment. But now that we know, and we've raised 4 kids, we've worked with children, we are very, very confident that we have seen almost it all.
Yes.
And that every human is unique in this space. And so Doc actually has in the book his recommended diagnostic process. And so we're going to go through that today. And it's kind of cool because we're going to start with the most basic element, which in fact is the two-dimensional checklist.
Right. And this is where hopefully when you've gone into their doctor's office, at least they've had some type of behavior checklist, right? Yeah. So you have your so level 1, number 1, we're going to go through 8 of these. This is what over years and years and years of doing this, working with thousands of children and families, this is really the best way that we don't land up in a situation that's just a flip of a coin. You remember we talked about that with the DSM and overdiagnosis, is that if you just look at the behaviors, you're going to always come up with, this thing, right? But if we look deeper, we're going to find some other things. But we do start with the behaviors. Okay, I'm not denying that. We need to look at that. So you have things like the Connors checklist, which is very good. You typically want to get some perspectives from some other environments. So you're looking at, you give the same checklist to the teacher from a teacher version, maybe give it to a coach, give it to a parent. As the child gets a little bit older into their teens, you actually might have a youth report where they kind of identify their behaviors. I feel like some of the checklists can be very loaded, like by loaded, I mean the only questions they're asking is about attention, but they're not asking about, hey, does this child have anxiety? Do they wake up at night? Do they have bedwetting? Do they have aggressiveness? Things that may be pointing totally someplace else, but you'll get a checklist, what some of these ones that are out there that all they are is ADHD questions. And he or she is getting those scored against them as ADHD, but you're missing all the other ones. So a behavior checklist, the one I like is the Achenbach, which is the child behavior checklist. And that works really well because it has 113 questions. And yes, there's ADHD ones, but there's also ones about social functioning, about physiological functioning, about emotional functioning. And so we can see the context. You get all these series of scales and you see them in relation to each other. I mean, you've seen those in some of our reports. Yeah,
right? That makes a ton of sense, what you're saying. So that is super helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do you go next?
So now that we've kind of identified, so imagine you've got these 10 like categories that are like on a graph, and they're kind of going up and down. And yes, so many times we see the ADHD one come up, but then I see, the anxiety one's even higher than that one. The depression one is higher, or the social isolation is higher, or the acting out is higher. So it's like, we have to see where's that coming from, because I attribute many of those things as secondary things to an underlying psychological thing. So at this point, you now have to go into the personality testing. So now you have to see like, well, why is that happening? Not what is it, but what is the why behind it? So now you have to dig a little bit deeper. And here's where I start to do some more what are called projective testing. So we'll use drawings. One in particular we use is called figure in the rain drawing, where we're kind of seeing how the child projects in stress and how they cope with that stress. You can also have a kinetic family drawing where you kind of look at the family doing something. Your house tree person drawings. And then I use the Rorschach a lot, which everybody's like, really? The Rorschach? I'm like, if you know how to use the Rorschach, and I've been trained, years and years of training in the Rorschach, it is one of the best tools out there for really kind of seeing below or deeper in. So this other dimension. I'm not just looking at, is it on or is it off? I'm trying to see where is it coming from depth-wise. And I can get below the unconscious, and even with some extremely oppositional children. So I used to do a lot of work on the child and adolescent psychiatric units at Pine Rest Christian Hospital in Michigan. And I would come in and help the psychiatrist figure out what the diagnosis was. And the projective testing lets us sort out, is this depression with psychotic features? Is this bipolar? Is this schizophrenia? So you need that stuff to really get that layer down.
Okay. Those are really strong. Then you go to your IQ testing.
Yes.
Why would you do that?
So we need to start to figure out what is the underlying horsepower, or what is the potential within this child. So sometimes, as all of us know, that if we go into a situation where we don't feel really competent, we can get kind of a learned helplessness sometimes, or I did a study back in the 90s where we looked at kids that had been placed in residential facilities and looked at what most of those kids had an underlying learning disability. So it was very interesting. Like, yes, they ended up in these residential facilities, but a lot of it was because of acting out, because they didn't feel competent in what they were doing in the academic arenas. And so it was very interesting when we would start to address some of the learning disabilities, and a lot of times this was through vision therapy and things, the emotional stuff started to get better. So in IQ testing, you have to set that baseline. You have to figure out, where are they on the bell curve? The bell curve's not bad. The bell curve's a good thing because it helps you understand, oh, this person's in a very difficult environment, or what happens on the gifted side is they're in an environment where they're bored out of their mind, and their inattention is coming from the teacher is actually a very boring individual to them, and they want something that's more complex.
Oh, yeah. That makes a ton of sense. We had one of those.
Yes. Yes, we did, where it just needed to be strong, more of a challenge.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. All right. We'll do some more when you come back.
Let's go.
Hey, welcome back. We are talking about DOC's diagnostic procedure for ADHD. So hold on to your seats because we've gotten through step 1, step 2, step 3.
Yeah.
And this is an 8-step, an 8-stepper. So Doc's got some more to unload for us. However, I did want to announce that Doc is doing a lecture next week on Thursday night.
Yeah.
It's May 7, I believe.
Yes, it is.
And it will be at the Peninsula Club.
And it's at 6:30.
Ooh, that's a tough time. 6:30. So eat dinner early and then come out. 6:30. It's an hour to an hour and a half total. It's free, but you do have to register.
Yes, you do need to register. So you can do that through that number, 616-341-2299. Next Thursday at the Peninsula Club, 6:30. You're going to love it, right? I mean, don't you think?
It's really good. It's good, energetic stuff, more education, and just talking about Your Brain Matters. It's always fun. There's always good energy in the room.
Yeah.
And the reason we need the registration is that we have overfilled a room or two. And when that happens, the fire chief is not happy.
No.
So we have to obey rules, and we want you to reserve your seat and come and enjoy learning some new things and enjoy, just the group being together and learning is always a good feeling as well.
Yes. So it's free, but we need you to get that seat registered.
Yes, that's why we need you to register. Yeah. Okay.
Let's pick up.
Okay, we are picking up. Doc mentioned we have to measure IQ, and that is not to say whether you're smart or not smart. It's to understand the horsepower of the brain of the individual who is paying attention or not paying attention. So super important to have a number to know on the bell curve what you're working with. So then after you learn that, I know you like to go into academic testing.
Yeah, so once I've gotten the intellectual potential, we've kind of found out how strong this computer is. And everybody's all along the scale, and that's fine.
And we love that.
We love it because we're going to help you achieve your potential.
Yeah.
And even if you're further down on the scale, what we've seen with our training is we actually we'll see IQ increases of 10 to 15 points, which is just staggering. Most people say, well, that's static. You can't move it. Not true. You can move it. You're cleaning up the brain, the stress, the anxiety, and you can make it stronger. So we got to get that number. Once we get that number, now I can measure things that we acquire. So you're born with an intellectual potential. A lot of times it's genetically given to you. Unless you experience some type of injury, it's probably going to remain somewhat static, or if you do some type of training to make the brain more optimal. But once I have that number, then I take what I acquire. So what is the things that we acquire? Academics, okay, language, different things that we learn, math, reading, writing. These you weren't born with. Okay, I wasn't born speaking English. That was taught to me. I wasn't born learning to read. I learned. So what should happen is your academics should align with your intellectual potential. It's when there's a discrepancy between your intellectual potential and your academic performance that we're able to identify a learning disability. Okay. And typically that's a 21-point difference between the two. So we have to then see, are there some underlying learning problems? Okay.
Yeah.
Now we jump into number 5 is attention and impulse control testing. Now, a lot of times this is used in a vacuum. So somebody will get a checklist and they may get an IVA or a CPT, a continuous performance test. The problem is if you don't have the IQ, you don't know where the child should score on the continuous performance. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally could see how somebody could bomb, as we say, the IVA, such as myself, which I have taken this test before.
Yeah.
And what's important then is to understand my horsepower, right? Because if my horsepower is low and I bomb it, that makes kind of sense. I may be working at my potential. But if my horsepower is high and I bomb this test, I probably have an attention issue.
Yes, and I'm not going to say whether you do or not.
I do.
You do?
So it is statistically sound. Anyway, but I have worked on that and trained with that.
Yeah.
And so I can say from my own experience, like you can change these things. So it's interesting that I can be saying it in the room as a person who actually have experienced that.
Yeah, and we've done, you usually use continuous performance tests a lot of times to measure the efficacy of a stimulant like Adderall, Concerta, Ritalin. But we've also, back in the 90s, we did a study with an insurance company, or excuse me, a hospital. And what we did with that hospital was we looked at individuals with low continuous performance testing versus medicine, and then we looked at them versus 3 months of neurofeedback. We outperformed over and over and over the medicine group and got those IVA scores, those attention scores, equal with the individual's IQ. So you're using that as a measurement. So then, once you have that, now we need to start to look at the physiology. Okay, so we're going, if you're noticing, this is kind of following a pattern of we went from behaviors to emotions, psychological functioning, to some of these measurable things. And now we're up to kind of the body. And in the body, I need to think of how the autonomic nervous system, which we've talked about a lot about on this podcast. And on the autonomic nervous system, we're looking at what is the breathing doing, how the person's taking in oxygen. Second, how is the heart responding to the breathing? And is it in a stress state or a parasympathetic state? You have to see that because if the heart and the body are stressed, that's going to come out in a lot of different ways. And one of the most obvious ones is your attention's going to be impaired, right?
Yeah. In fact, even as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about how all step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 would all be impacted to what's going on in step 6.
Absolutely.
So it's almost, and we can talk about this in the next segment as well, but it's almost like maybe should you even start at step 6? Because if you saw things that are way out of balance, you would obviously say, if I work on those things, I'm going to impact 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Exactly. I had somebody about 6 months ago who wanted to get some IQ testing on their child who's having all these different behavioral issues. And I said, you know what? Let's first kind of even the playing field. Let's get the breathing, the heart, the brain working. Then let's test their IQ because I know it's going to get better. Yeah. So why go spend the resources and the time and energy to get that when we can see it in a more optimal state? So yes, you're right. Sometimes working reverse is important. The number 7 is sleep. And we've done 3-part series on sleep. We talk about sleep all the time. But if you are not measuring sleep in attention problem, you are doing a disservice to your child. And most physicians aren't doing this. A third of kids with attention disorders have an underlying sleep problem, and nobody's measuring this. And this has to be done with polysomnograph, not with or a ring or a Fitbit. We need to actually put leads on the head. We have a great device that's non-invasive, but we have to look at sleep architecture and see what's going on in sleep if we're really going to measure attention. Because the brain, if it's not sleeping well, it's just going to make up for it during the day by by almost sleeping while it's awake, which then looks like an attention disorder, right?
Right. And the main treatment for ADHD is something that keeps you awake.
Point. Yeah.
So it's just a really, really dangerous combination. And we need to know what's going on, because then there's also some treatments for ADHD that involve a blood pressure medicine, which does calm more the system. It's a beta blocker. But that would interfere with the sleep cycle as well. So we've got to optimize the circadian rhythm, all of us, but especially our children.
Yeah. And then the last one, which we probably won't be able to finish in this section, but we'll pick it up next, is looking at the brain waves. The brain waves are the ultimate upstream. If you have had, somebody hasn't looked at brain waves in a diagnostic assessment, they're doing a disservice to you, to your child, and we have no idea. It's a flip of a coin whether you have the diagnosis right. And yes, while we have it number 8, it's probably the first thing that you should be doing is looking at the EEG, because the brain doesn't lie. It will show you what's going on.
Welcome back. We are wrapping up a great episode talking about Doc's diagnostic process for ADHD. So this is an amazing list, the 8 things that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I feel like it is definitely the 3-dimensional approach. I'm kind of laughing about it a little bit because Doc and I just had this experience with our dog.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
We're going to bring up Cooper.
Here comes Cooper. Our dog Cooper, I suspect, has either a thyroid or an adrenal problem, right?
Okay.
So I am, as a nurse and as Cooper's mother, just for a year and a half, I'm watching this dog. I'm like, his hair, he's losing hair, but he's old. So what does that mean? And this or that, okay? But just like, we have done more diagnostic things for our dog than people will be doing for a child with ADHD.
It's amazing, really, isn't it?
Yes. In fact, yesterday, my vet wanted an ultrasound, and I looked at her and I said, could we do the treatment without the ultrasound? And she said, I would need you to sign an AMA paper against medical authority or whatever. And I mean, I'm talking, this is how serious we're talking about our dog in this current world. And yet with the children in a child's brain,
you're right. Yeah.
We are doing a checklist and out the door. So when you hear Doc and I be so adamant and so passionate about this, please know this comes from also our own personal experience. We already mentioned our son. That was a very bad experience. And if we could do anything to go back and redo for him, if you saw him today, you would literally laugh out loud to think that he had a diagnosis of ADHD. He's the most focused person in the room, exactly. Okay? And I could have told you that based off of the way he could play a video game and such. But then our second born, they told us she wasn't paying attention. And she was what Doc had said earlier in this episode. She was extremely bright. And the information in the standard classroom setting was not challenging. And so she was drifting around because her brain wanted to continue learning. So it was learning about the squirrel outside the window, and it was learning about this and that. In fact, get this. We had no idea she couldn't see the blackboard or the green board, whatever color the chalkboard was, until her teacher was just moving the seating chart around. She got moved to the front of the room, and she said, what's that up on the right side of the chalkboard? And the teacher's like, that's been there all year. She never saw it. It's like a little check system. Like if the class is being naughty, there's 3 strikes and you're out or whatever. Yeah. She never even knew it was there. And long story short, she got some glasses and she could see, lo and behold. But this person had no ADHD. She needed more challenge.
Yeah.
And then our other 2 students, they didn't have any of this kind of stuff going on, but we had to really work with those.
Well, Audrey had epilepsy.
Well, no, but I mean, like, as far as attention is concerned, and you talk about the 8 steps or whatever, those 2, we literally had to beg them to stop trying so hard. Like, that's how hard they focused, and it was more driven by, like, the overactivated brain. And so just thinking in our own family situation, the difference of what was going on in academia, in their learning, is it just makes us really passionate, because we did do a disservice to our firstborn, and then the other three, and then also going back to Joe, when we learned more of these things, we were able to do a good service to their brain, their individual brain. So we want this for everyone. And it's very sad to us, the system and what happens, but we do see a lot of it.
Yep, we do. And I think your point about the dog, and like how we're doing more tests on the dog than the 90% of children get before somebody puts them on a class 2 controlled substance that's in the same category as crack cocaine and all these other addictive type things. Yeah. And kids coming off of Adderall when they want to get off is extremely difficult, and what it does to their sleep and appetite and all kinds of things. So
also, this is totally off subject, but it came in my mind.
Okay, go ahead.
And Doc and I went to a prison program
through the Joe Gibbs Ministry.
Joe Gibbs Ministry, and it was really, we ate lunch with a group of guys in this ministry who have, during their sentence, been able to earn degrees in the ministry.
Theology, yeah.
Yeah, like so legitimate theology degrees. But every story, those kids, everyone told us it was bad in school. It was really bad in school. And like I never fit the mold in school. And then many of them were on the meds. And then they went into drugs. And so then they got into violence because they were in the drug system. Anyway, it was just so difficult to hear the stories, because these are people that now were serving life sentences, who started out as the 7-year-old kid that was struggling in first or second grade.
Yep. And it's all connected. And we talk about these 8 steps, and whether you do them with Royer Neuroscience or not, I don't care.
No.
What I care about is the child out there. Go find somebody. But you need to go through these 8 steps to do service to a creation of God's, which is the children, right? And so we really are just, as we look at this diagnostic phase, we have one more episode on ADHD that we'll do next week, but this one is super important on this whole diagnostic. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about treatment, but it's very important that you get this down, is that you go through these 8 steps. And we finished up with the brainwave. The EEG is so, so important. We know in 2012, the FDA said this is a valid biomarker. It improves the accuracy of the ADHD diagnosis by close to 40%. Why people aren't using it, I have no idea. But you need to measure the slow waves, which have to do with the brain's recovery, and the fast waves, which have to do with stress. And there has to be a very delicate balance in there. There needs to be the slow waves need to be almost 2.5 times the rest of the brain waves. And then the fast waves need to be less than 0.5. And what happens in so many of these kids, they have all this stress brainwave that's like up in the 0.9, 1, and then somebody, puts them on a stimulant. That's the dumbest thing you can do, is you haven't looked at their brain. Their brain is wired for sound, and you're now putting them on an amphetamine, and you wonder why they have tics, why they're anxious, why they can't sleep, why they're losing weight, because you didn't look at their autonomic nervous system correctly.
Man, something that bears repeating is that you said is this is not something that we're just fans of or whatever. This is like the FDA has approved these standards, these numbers.
Right.
The medical community is ignoring that. They're
Big
not
time.
using it. But that doesn't take away from the fact that they are approved standards of objective measurement.
Yes, the theta ratio.
Yeah,
definitely.
And then the efficacy, because everyone wants to say evidence-based medicine. That's the thing. This is evidence-based medicine. It's already studied more than once. It's out there. People are ignoring it to the detriment of these kids. And then the other thing that just I have to repeat is if we just started with the EEG.
Right.
If we just started with the EEG, we would already know about the sleep. We would know a lot about these levels of anxiety
yep.
that could be driving so many of these things.
Or on the positive side, a lot of these kids have massive levels of creativity.
Yeah.
Hence the whole reason for the title of the book, Extinguishing Einstein, is inside of there, these slow waves, these alpha waves are through the roof. They're the next Tesla. They're the next Steve Jobs. Okay, they're the next Elon Musk. They're these people that can change the world. But because those brainwaves are so close to the attention brainwaves, it looks like the kid's checking out in class, kind of like you were talking about Katie, but she wasn't. She was just bored out of her mind, right? But that gets misdiagnosed. Person gets put on medicine. And then what do? We've extinguished our future. We've extinguished the future Einsteins. And we have to go beyond that. That's the challenge to everybody out there. Whether, again, Royer's Neuroscience or not, you've got to save these people, these kids that are actually our future.
Yeah, and probably the hardest thing is that it takes time and it takes effort.
Right.
That's the hardest thing.
And money.
Right, because in most cases it's not getting covered by insurance. There are cases where it is, or you can use your HSA spending accounts.
Yeah.
But it's something where you're going to have to be the advocate for yourself or for your child. But one of the ways you and I often look at this is, okay, we have 4 kids. We love water. So immediately we put our 4 kids in swim lessons, right?
Exactly.
So because we want them to enjoy water, we want them to be safe around the water. We want to enjoy the water as a family, blah, blah, blah. But the way we look at the 2-dimensional diagnosis and treatment of ADHD is as if I just gave the kids floaties. Here's your noodle, here's your noodle, here's your noodle, here's your noodle. And we're all going to spend the day in the water. Hey, that might be cool when they're 5, but when they're 12 and all they can do is the noodle in the water, we did not do them a good service.
Oh, I love the analogy. I remember when you first came up with this a number of years ago. That's what we're doing. Is we can chemically alter the brain, but you're just giving the kid a floaty. You're not teaching them to swim. You're not using the brain's greatest ability, which is to learn, right?
Right.
And we've become this society that's just okay with floaties. Everybody's like out in the pool in floaties, and nobody knows how to swim. Right?
And you had to face the difficulties. Let me tell you, swim lessons wasn't always fun. Sometimes the kids hated it, but we did it because there was a goal that we were going for, and they had the potential to reach that goal.
Right. And underneath all of this is the brain's capacity to learn. And if you can learn physics, you can learn to focus. Your brain matters.